Hello, hello there. I am the Dermatomaniac, back again talking about my deferred ownership party. And today we are going to be talking about my deferred ownership party, the right-wingers, not the right-wingers, the nationalists, the people that are very, very pro-patriot, very, very pro-American, red-blooded American, some of them that want to keep their ethnic groups and their culture in time. And so, we're going to talk about those people, people who care more about the local Americans than the internationalists. And I honestly do agree with them to some extent. It does become a little ridiculous when you see like immigrants, right? And some of them are getting hotel stays for a few weeks using taxpayer money. That's a little ridiculous. We can't afford that as a society. Luckily, I think they've stopped giving taxpayer money to some of the immigrants in New York City. But it becomes an issue when you have people who are in the streets homeless, especially some veterans who literally sacrificed for this country, and people who came in who haven't sacrificed anything for this country. They came in to sacrifice to get to the country, but they didn't sacrifice for the land, you know what I mean? So that's really, I do sympathize with I don't know what you call them, nationalists, patriots, I don't know, J.D. Vance types. I don't know what you call these people, right? I guess you could call them America First people. I sympathize with them a little bit. I would never call myself America First. I do have the similar, story how my ancestors came over from the 1600s. I bet you a lot of these people probably had ancestors that originated from at least the 1800s, 1600s, like mine did. So a lot of these people definitely have ancestors from 400 years ago. Some of them may actually have darker skin tones, but most of these people I'm talking about are like light skin tones. So what do? How do we appeal to these nationalist types, these patriot types? I don't know what you call them. I don't really care. You guys can label each other whatever you like. I don't really like labels that much. I call myself a deferred owner based on my political party called the Deferred Ownership Party. But how do we appeal to them? And this is a very, very unique question because obviously I'm an internationalist. I'm against tariffs. I'm against anything that goes against, free trade in a society. I'm even very pro-immigrant. I think we should unite with Mexico. Obviously, I don't care that much about the American nation. I think that, enforcing our borders too much might actually lead to people distrusting us. So it is the best interest that, we could maintain immigration policy, but it is in the best interest that we do it in the sense that the people that are here follow the rules well enough to be, economically viable for them to stay here. I don't know how you say that, but you know what I mean, right? So in that sense, it's just obviously United with Mexico is not going to appeal to the right-wingers, but what I will say is we will offer them a deal with our new deferred ownership mandatory savings plan. So originally, I was going to, because I'm an internationalist, I love international index funds. However, I decided that that's probably not going to be a good idea to appeal to the Republicans or the nationalists or the patriots, whatever you freaking call them. Let's just say they're Republican. Just for the sake of argument, they like local economics. They don't care about internationalism. I don't blame them. Some of them are pro-union. Of course, I've already talked about appealing to the socialists, so if you want to go back, you could call yourself a national socialist that has some baggage, but we could do that. Appeal to the unions already, so I've already made a video on that. But how do we appeal to the right-wingers, the people that are nationalists? Well, we already have index funds for those people. It's called VOO, the S&P 500, VTI, the Total U.S. Domestic Index Fund. What is the other one? We have an allied fund in our TSPs for people who are thrift savings accounts, for people who are government employees. I love the idea of having an allied fund for just the people that want Western money only. People that are allied with the West, quote unquote. I don't know who the West are. I don't really care. I guess Great Britain, United Kingdom, Spain, all those countries are technically, quote unquote, in the West. It's a little bit vague, but you get the point. Anybody who's like super aligned with the United States could be in the Allied fund, and maybe we could have a lesser Allied fund, like the people in Japan or South Korea. That they don't share the same culture, but they're definitely allied with the West. So, Allied West fund, But if you only want to invest in the white people, or the white Western culture, quote unquote, you buy the white fund. So that's the way we're going to be able to appeal to these nationalist types. Because the thing is, if we don't do it, we're not going to be able to get our party off the ground. We definitely need the nationalist types to appeal to our party. I am not, by no means am I a nationalist, and no means am I a socialist. I hate both groups pretty much equally, in my opinion. I probably hate the socialists a little bit more because the logic they use is, yes, they do understand that there is some theft in labor, but hierarchy is natural, and they disagree with that. They think that hierarchy is inevitably going to collapse. I disagree with that. You need hierarchy. You need structured society, and you need discipline. That is something I will totally disagree with socialists on. I disagree with creativity. I think structure is more important. But, that being said, the reason my life is a mess right now is because I have no structure, right? That's why I'm making structure for everyone. Probably not a good thing. Makes me a hypocrite, but, that's why I don't like the socialists. Nationalists they want structure, but they want structure based on what people look like sometimes, depending on who you ask. I mean, some nationalists dislike the land. I bet you there are, what you call black nationalist people, or dark-skinned nationalist people, that obviously only have loyalty to their land, the deep south, the United States. There are black nationalists who only care about the United States. So it doesn't, we have to appeal to every single type of nationalist here. The Amish, I bet you they're nationalists for their own nation. Because in my opinion, a nation as a culture, it could be a ethno-religious group, an ethno-linguistic group. It could be this a linguistic group. Obviously, with the United States, almost all of us speaking English, about 80% of us, it becomes an issue. Well, there's so many ethnic groups that do speak English. Even the Native Americans have lost their languages to speak English, that they've lost their quote-unquote nation. In my opinion, they've lost at least the main culture of their nation, which in my opinion is linguistic. Which is why we should never draw the borders based on linguistics. We should always draw the borders based on watersheds, which obviously would probably make the nationalists mad. Like, almost everything I advocate for is against nationalism. But in order to appeal to them, I would have an investment index fund for the nationalists, if they really wanted to. We would still enforce the mandatory savings accounts, but if they really wanted to, we aren't going to do sector funds, because I think sector funds are too risky. But I'm okay with allied funds. I'm okay with domestic market funds. I'm okay with international funds. I'm not okay with this, let's have only enemy funds. I think that's a bit strange. People who are enemies of the United States investing in the United States with mandatory savings accounts, it's a bit strange. Again, you gotta watch the other episodes in order to understand my political ideology. So that being said, do you think, do people actually think this is gonna work? I don't know. But I think having index funds that are exclusively US based might be the best thing we could do. Obviously, we're still gonna put 30% in bonds. I think a good percentage of that's going to be U.S. Treasuries anyway. Again, the stability of the white American government, although, again, the United States is, even the government's increasingly non-white. So, I just feel like these nationalist types, that, yes, they're demographically going to be less significant in the future. They're not going to be replaced. I don't believe in the white, what do you call it, the white replacement theory, whatever the crap they call that thing. But they are demographically smaller in terms of percentage. Their kids are still going to exist. They're not going to be, quote-unquote, replaced. I don't know what that even means, in my opinion, In my workplace, we have every single group of people I could think of. We got Syrians. We got people from Honduras, people from El Salvador. Right? They're allowed to stay here. I see nothing wrong with these people. Obviously, if they start, supporting Sharia law, and they have Sharia law courts in the United States, I might have a big issue with that. I'm not a big fan of multiculturalism when it comes to, kidnapping someone and eating them for, sacrificial rituals. I'm not a big believer in multiculturalism with that. because you're violating someone's individual rights. We need to respect the culture of this certain group of people that eats other people. No, we don't need to respect that culture. It violates U.S. law. There is culture here that needs to be respected. So that's my opinion on it. I don't believe in multiculturalism. That being said, also, to appease the nationalists, because of my new constitution we obviously have drafted off of my head, and especially in the first episode, we will have a civil law court and a common law court. Common law is basically found in almost any country that's been influenced by the British. In fact, we actually have it here in the United States as well. Common law is very, very important in Canada, United States, Great Britain, some other countries. Singapore, I believe, is common law. And then you look at civil law. Louisiana has civil law. It's the only U.S. state I could think of off the top of my head that has civil law. If you think about Quebec in Canada has civil law. France is a very important country that has civil law. Germany is one of the most successful countries with civil law. Switzerland, basically all the continental European countries have civil law. And so I want to fuse both law systems together with our two Supreme Courts. Well, actually have three Supreme Courts. We'll have a civil law Supreme Court for our retirement systems and all that crap, and marriages and all that stuff. And then for our criminal law, we'll have common law. I think that's a really good system. And then we'll have a third court that will decide which case goes to either the Supreme Court of the civil law side or the common law side. We'll have a dual judicial system. Well, technically a tripod, because the third one is just going to decide which one goes where. So that's what I want to do. And obviously with civil law, it's interesting because you look at civil law. I know I'm going off topic to appease the right-wingers, but whatever, we're going to do it anyway. Civil law, you notice that the jury is sitting with the judge. They're deciding on the facts of the case based on the criminal code, or the civil code that they're looking at. With common law, however, there is a separation of powers between the jury and the judge. I find that so fascinating, and I love both systems, which is why I want both systems in my new constitution. It's such a strange way to look at it, but I see benefits with both. I could see how having a judge and a jury there actually might be a good thing. Having 3 judges and 9 jurors there for civil law cases when it comes to divorce, and when it comes to reasoning with that, there's so many messy divorces, or the parents will get the kids and the money for the kids, and the other parent wanted the kid, and they should have split it 50-50, but the jury and judge were obviously very biased, or the judge was very biased. So in that case, we do need civil law courts. We do. We don't need a common law system for freaking inheritance. I'm sorry. Civil law is the best way to get it, and I think having a jury of peers that is actually in grind with the judge instead of a separation of powers might be the best bet. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. Or 3 judges in my system. But that being said, right, we will keep the common law system to appeal to the right-wingers, because they clearly love common law. I've seen almost every single right-leaning person loves at least the ideal of the Supreme Court. I haven't seen very many left-wingers like the Supreme Court as much as the right-leaning people, or the nationalists, or whatever you call them. Republicans, again, I guess we should just use party terms. Republicans like the Supreme Court more than Democrats. Democrats find it that it fully dismantles democracy, sort of, having this hierarchical court. And that's why I recommend a civil law courts on the other side. Now, obviously, the civil law, is more democratic, I would say, but it's also more tyrannical. There's no separation of powers when you have that trial. So it is fascinating to think about, but we are going to keep common law for the Republicans. Obviously, nobody's ever thinking about getting rid of it, so it's probably stupid for me to make that a selling point. But we will try with our new system. And since Louisiana has civil law, we could do it in individual states before we push it into the federal court system. We could do it. I want reform. We will keep... here's another thing that Republicans really like. They like that the Constitution is not I guess it's more constitutional right wingers. They like that the Constitution is not easy to change, and I do agree. Having, what is it? I think it's like 2/3 of the states propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of the states make an amendment. Absolutely. I could see how that might be a very important thing to keep in the Constitution. I think what we'll do is we'll use the 5th article of the U.S. Constitution to push my new Constitution. So obviously we're never going to appeal to every single Republican, nationalist type, whatever, MAGA or whatever you call them. I don't really care. I guess MAGA is it's going to be such an outdated term in 10 years anyway, because the guy who is attached to it, if he goes away, there's no clear successor. I guess J.D. Vance would be. So, I mean, if anybody's listening to this who is a right-leaning person and you disagree with me on this stuff, it's always good to disagree, but I think that my deferred ownership party is actually probably the best thing going for it. I think if we could actually appeal to the ideal of responsibility and hierarchy and learning a skill and a trade, so you don't have to rely on the government, which I think a lot of Republicans would agree with me on that, then absolutely I think we can get right-wingers, because I think right-leaning people are actually going to really like my ideology more than left-wingers. Despite the fact that I do, quote-unquote, want everyone to have a piece of a publicly traded corporation, quote-unquote, with pass-through voting through index funds, which is probably the most revolutionary part of my ideology. It's not, and it's been tried now at Vanguard and BlackRock. We actually do it in 2020. It was 2022 when they introduced that stuff. But I want to do it at a national scale with our Social Security system. I think it's dumb that you can't inherit Social Security from your parents. I really want actual inherited Social Security. That's what my deferred ownership party is about. It's about building generational wealth through mandatory means. I think the ideal of the government is to guide the people to greatness. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Obviously, that goes against individual liberty, which a lot of libertarians would disagree with me on that. I've stayed away from libertarianism now. I've realized that libertarianism is very flawed, because let's say you spend all your money on weed, but now the rest of society now has to rely on you. But if you were, forced to save money, just in case something bad happens, now you have that safety net there. And obviously my mandatory savings accounts will only have 4 things you can spend money on, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But it would be interesting to see. I just disagree with obviously I think the people I disagree with most of the libertarians, and they're obviously Austrians. I'm more of a Chicagoan. Most libertarians are Austrian-based economists, and it's fine, or at least Austrian theorists. Just like I'm a Chicagoan theorist in economics. Perfectly fine. And then the right-wingers are more like pro-nationalist economics, which I don't know. I guess would be protectionism, mercantilism, what is it, copyrightism? I don't know what you call it. I'm not a big fan of copyright, as you could tell. I think ideals should be freely traded, although, again, you can make an argument, that's ownership, having a copyright of your own ideals. Okay, I guess you're right. Whatever. But, yeah, hopefully I made a good argument for why right-leaning people should, in my opinion, be included in our system. Oh, and by the way, I have my dogs here today. My dogs are very, they have sloppy tongues, and they're going to enjoy the sun out now with me. Anyway, goodbye. I hope you've enjoyed my new video on what we will do to appeal to the right-wingers, or the nationalist types.